afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome. Today we will discuss the book of Exodus, the second book in the Bible called Exodus. They also been called the Pentateuch. It's the first five books God gave him to the of Israel. It comes, like I said, it talks about God's deliverance and establishment of his covenant. God's deliverance, first thing, deliverance and the establishment of his covenant. First, God has to deliver them, and then God has to establish generations. In Exodus 1, verses 8, the narrative of Israel's oppression in Egypt and the call of Moses, the plagues and the Exodus. And we all understand the book of Moses, how he fled from Pharaoh to the land where he met God. And God spoke to him. And God asked him to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, out of depression, out of all those slavery mentality. Takes them out there. But Pharaoh didn't listen to that. Exodus 1 verses 18, the narrative of Israel's oppression in Egypt, the call of Moses, the plagues, and the Exodus. And in Exodus 19:24, talk about the giving of the law at the Mount Sinai, including the 10 Commandments. And in Exodus 25 verses 40, instructions for building the tabernacle and the establishment of the worship practices. Okay, let me discuss it. Okay, Moses. Who is Moses? Who is he? We need to understand who's Moses. Moses was chosen by God to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. Is to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. Then there was a guy, his name was to free the Israelites. It was just Moses, not to free the Israelites. And then the brother of Moses, Aaron, and his sister Miriam, Moses' siblings. God used family for his purposes. And the sister of Moses, Miriam, that was the sister of Moses. The Israelites, the people who are freed from slavery. Now, in order for God to let them out of Egypt, that mentality of Egypt, the first thing God needs to do to free them completely is that he has to deliver them. So it means that deliverance has to take place from oppression. In order for God to free them from oppression, he has to deliver them. So you need deliverance before you can be free. What is holding you back? God always starts with the covenant. The establishment of the law and the 10 Commandments is part of the covenant between God and Israel. Covenant between God and the Israel. And then faith and obedience, the importance of trusting and obeying God's commands, the importance of trusting God's commandments, and God's presence, the guidance of Israelites by God through Moses, the plagues, and the pillar of cloud of fire. Okay. When we talk about the symbolism and imaginary, we talk about the Passover lamb that represents salvation and deliverance from judgments. Its blood protects the Israelites from death, foreshadowing Jesus as the ultimate Passover lamb. That is the things we need to understand. The book of Genesis, the beginning where it all starts, where humankind all starts. And then we are doing now the book of Exodus in the land of Egypt when God called Moses to deliver them. So the deliverance has to take place before God can remove them. Before God can establish a covenant, there must be deliverance. First thing, there must be deliverance. Secondly, before God can establish a covenant. And then comes faith and obedience. And then God's presence. And the plagues symbolizes God's judgment against the Egypt's false gods and their person of the Israelites, showcasing his power and authority. This is where God's showing his powerful power, amazing power, glorious power. They also foreshadow the Passover, emphasizing the themes of deliverance and redemption. Deliverance and redemption. That's it is very important. We need to understand it. We need to take our child and let them know about these things, that they can take it by heart. They must know it by heart. The book of Exodus. Exodus means exit out of Egypt into the promised land. Into the promised land. God promised them, but now God needs deliverance to take them out of Egypt and to free them and to build a covenant so that they can become faith and obedience before God's presence can be there to guide them throughout the way. And the tabernacle represents God's presence among his people and the covenant relationship of our lives. Is to trust God's plans like the Israelites. Believers are obedience to God's commands helps in living a life that aligns with God's will. And the value of deliverance is was the Israelites newly freed from slavery, receiving God's love and instructions for living as his covenant people, understand identity. That is all for today. That we have discussed this book of Exodus. First thing, the deliverance. Secondly, the covenant God wants to establish with the people, and our God show his power through the Israelites. The powerful power, the dynamis power of God. God show it to the people for us to understand. When we talk about Exodus, the first thing what we must remember is we must remember the deliverance. And faith and obedience in God's presence, in the guidance of Israelites of cloud and fire. Most of us didn't see God, never heard about God, never heard about God. But God is real. We exist because he exists. We exist because he exists. He is the creator of the universe, to free them, to set them free. And some of us are still not freed yet. But we need deliverance. We can ask God for deliverance, to free us from oppression, to free us from God's deliverance and the establishment of his covenant. When we talk about Exodus, we talk about his covenant. The thing what we must get it by heart, and know it by heart. God's thank you to our wonderful people, Victor, our leader, and may God bless you. So, yeah, let me conclude it with the book of Exodus, God's deliverance and establishment of his covenant. Clearly, but next time I will make things better, and so that you can hear me clearly when we talk about these things. But I will repeat myself: God's deliverance and the establishment of his covenant.